Hello and welcome to People Tech Maritime's webinar with Sedna, Managing Maritime Data Using AI with Model Context Protocol. Our guest speakers today are Sedna's lead architect of AI, Owen Brennan, joined by Group Product Manager Robert Dickey, who will be leading a half-hour presentation followed by a Q&A session. Please leave any questions you may have for them in the Q&A section, and don't forget to vote if you see any questions that are of particular interest to you. Now, here's our founder and CEO, Carl Jeffrey, to start the talk.
So if you work in shipping, you're probably sitting at a desktop computer and you're doing your work. You've got your email open, your software applications and your company documents. So what if you could find out what's most important in your working world today by sending questions in natural language to a large language model like Claude, rather than going into all of your systems separately? It sounds like science fiction, but maybe it's getting closer, and we're going to find out today. Our company presenting is Sedna. They're probably the leading company in the maritime industry with tools to extract relevant information from your inbox and put it in a structured format. So, for example, you can find out about the nearest 20 vessels in one digital place rather than searching through your emails for it. But we can make it more useful if we can interrogate the data in natural language, and at the same time find information from other systems we have. Sedna is going to show how we can use a large language model like Claude to do this. We can talk to Claude in natural language. It uses its code writing ability to send the instruction to Sedna's software API. It gets the results back in code and displays that in natural language. And if we go a step further, we can have the LLM interrogating multiple software systems at once. So this might involve the AIs in different systems talking to each other with a standard called Model Context Protocol. And maybe in future, we'll interact with our emails, documents, and software by free text questions to Claude and never need to log on to any other software at all. So we've got two speakers today who are going to talk for about 15 minutes each, then we'll take your questions. So you can put your questions in the Q&A box at any time, but we'll take them at the end. We've got Robert Dickey, Group Product Manager with Sedna, and Owen Brennan, lead AI architect with Sedna, both based in the north of England. And Robert, I'd like to invite you to start your talk.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carl, and thanks to People Tech Maritime for having us present this. I'm going to jump in and share a screen, and then we'll get started. So, yeah, nicely open up there, Carl. Today we're going to talk to you about maritime data with a particular focus on the largest repository of that data, which is your email. Specifically, though, how new technologies like AI and MCP, or Model Context Protocol, can help to structure that and actually make it more actionable. Quick intros from our side. So, yeah, my name is Robert Dickey, Group Product Manager at Sedna. I've been with Sedna for the past 5 years, but I've spent the last 15 years building software in the maritime space. Prior to Sedna, I worked at a shipping agency in the UK, and I helped to build digital transformation projects and technology systems throughout that tenure. And I'm joined by Owen Brennan, who's our lead architect AI. Owen, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, hi there, everyone. I'm Owen Brennan, the lead architect for AI at Sedna. My background is in shipping technology as well. I previously founded and ran a company called Flitter, which looked at shipping documents, customs documents, extracting those and bringing value out of them using traditional machine learning as well as AI. Around 6 months ago, Sedna acquired my organization, and we're now bringing all of that capability into Sedna as well in multiple ways, including Model Context Protocol.
Cool. Thanks, Owen. And a little bit about Sedna as well. So we were founded in 2017 by a gentleman called Bill Doby, serial maritime entrepreneur who came from industry himself as well. Mainly focused on solving the email problem in industry, which I'm sure you're all aware is quite acute. But we're very proud to serve over 600 of the leading maritime and global trade businesses today through our platform. So I'm going to start by talking about the problem that the industry faces, and it's not all doom and gloom as much as the image would suggest. That actually is an image that was generated by Gemini, which is Google's own little AI model as well, and that's what AI is good at. But to think about the problem, traditional email systems, they were never built to handle the scale and complexity of modern business email data, and Maritime's no exception to that, and actually really pushes the boundaries even further. We're exchanging hundreds of emails across multiple counterparties, distributed across the globe, and all of which need to be retained, filed, and organized to comply with increasingly stringent legal requirements. And actually, email is usually the most valuable repository for this data, but most businesses aren't actually able to unlock that to its true potential. And some businesses that we speak to are spending hours across a working week trying to find historical emails, files, and documents that are just stored in these structures. And most importantly, your business email is your intellectual property. And really, in this kind of increasingly competitive world, this is your competitive advantage, the data that lives inside of your business. So tapping into this repository is a key to leveraging that. And AI is really helping to create a world where that's more and more possible, but it has to be approached in a conservative manner with the correct levels of care, because I'm sure we're all familiar with some of the fun and games AI can cause as well. Just in numbers, looking at an average voyage operator, we have seen that the average voyage these days, over 500 emails are exchanged typically between different counterparties in a typical voyage. And voyage operators are handling multiple voyages. We've seen 10 plus concurrent active voyages being managed by a single operator. And so that just magnifies the kind of volume of data that one individual is having to process and manage. And of course, more and more tools are coming into the industry, more and more places to check data. So we count 10 plus interactions with different software applications for a typical voyage. This would be things like your email, your chat, your voyage management system, your optimization systems, the sources of data that you consult from different places. So that complexity is only increasing. But we believe that email is actually flourishing. It needs an open network in order to exchange the data. So it's clearer than ever that the data for Maritime runs over these well-established pathways, and it always follows that path of least resistance. So getting that critical data to the right counterparty, that's non-negotiable, and it can carry significant consequences when we can't guarantee that. So what does that mean? We go back to what's tried and trusted, the lowest common denominator, the protocol everyone has on their desktop computer or in their pocket, and that's email. So of course, the challenge is how do we unify that data? Email data is messy, it's unstructured, it's hard to search for, it's inconsistent. But our desire to communicate expediently means that we trade that structure for speed. It gets the job done, but it does hamper our ability to connect the dots after the fact. So key decisions and actions that get taken by our colleagues, our counterparties, things that could influence our future decision making, they're kind of shuffled off to the archives. We don't see them again. They're not front of mind. They don't help us make decisions today. But we want to ask that question, what if that repository of knowledge could actually be retrospectively structured? And what if there was a way to organize that data and ask questions of it, gain these key insights without having to know specifically where the answers might lie? And so for Sedna, we believe actually universal API already exists. It's email. And for those who aren't familiar with the term API, that just means application programming interface. And that's really a means for exchanging data, particularly between different software platforms. So we don't actually think that email needs to change to provide the context. It's already there. And with the recent enhancements in the AI world, the potential of these capabilities becomes even more powerful. And this paves the way for higher quality data exchange across technologies. And we're actually really excited about this next technological evolution that we're going to show you in a moment. But what does that mean? We want to build a future where we can unlock everything that's buried inside of email. So what we're doing at Sedna, we're providing the structure to that data. We're recognizing and organizing the content that's inside the email, but we're also exposing that in different ways via our APIs. So that means it can be connected to other applications combined with other data sources. So if you've got a data warehouse or a BI tool, how can you then connect your email data more meaningfully into those platforms? And our API first approach has allowed us to bring that value to customers, wider technology stacks faster than traditional systems. But the good news is that, this boom in technology, this desire to connect things is actually making application connectivity non-negotiable. When you're buying a new software system, the API becomes a key part of that functionality. So we want to ask the question, what happens when we start to explore the capabilities of AI on top of that structured and connected world? And of course, AI, you might be using it today, you might not be, but AI alone is not actually going to be the thing that saves us. It has its practical uses, but let's start by looking at what it's good at today. So it's incredibly fast at recognizing patterns, crunching through massive amounts of information. And that's why you see it work so well for things like translating languages, recognizing images and speech, and also generating content. And it's also become really strong at taking over those repetitive thinking tasks, things that used to eat up so much of our time. And it can analyze, data, surface trends, and insights that you might have missed. So that's what it's really good at. It's digging out the things that humans might skim over. But then there's also the creative side. It's become a really powerful brainstorming partner for us. It can help us with writing, coding, problem solving, and it offers different perspectives and approaches that you individually might not have thought of on your own. And it would be remiss of me not to mention that it's incredibly good at what's become known as vibe coding. So if you did happen to want some coding or programming languages spat out, here's an example on screen of one that we actually cooked up. We gave Claude a couple of request and response schemas and asked it to build us an application from those. And within seconds, it was getting to work spitting this out. So very, very useful for those kind of practical time-consuming constructs, but also has its pitfalls. So it's not doing something so well today. So here's a great example. It's still learning. We need to make sure we're approaching this technological wave with a level of responsibility and safety. Hallucinations and overconfidence are real problems in the space. And this is actually an AI overview provided by Google's Gemini in their search results. And there's a nice recommendation there for anyone who likes their peanut butter extra crunchy. But for most folks, the exposure you might have had today to AI, if at all, is using an interface like ChatGPT, Claude, or Copilot. And each of them have their own quirks and novelties. And what we often hear is that beyond, a quick email draft or maybe helping to figure out what to get a loved one for a birthday present, few folks actually feel that they're really pushing the boundaries of these tools, particularly in the working environment. So that's where model context protocol comes in. And this is potentially a new concept for some folks on the call. And I'm going to go through a bit of an explanation today, and we're going to jump into a practical use case after this. But something really interesting happens when you begin to provide more structure and clarity to those AI tools. And that's where Model Context Protocol, or MCP for short, comes into play. So what is it? It's a standardization framework that allows AI applications to securely connect to external data sources like databases, file systems, and APIs. So you can think of it as a universal adapter. So instead of each AI tool building custom connections to every data source, MCP provides like a common interface that works across different systems. It enables AI assistants to access real-time information from your local files, your company databases, or web services without compromising security or requiring complex integrations. And it was developed by Anthropic, who are the makers of Claude, and it was mainly made for developers to build AI applications that can work with existing tools and data sources in a standardized way. So MCP is not the only way to do this, but it's Anthropic's proposed standard for doing this, and we're definitely enjoying exploring the capabilities so far. But to put it simply, MCP, what it really does, it removes that technical hurdle that's been keeping everyday users from getting AI to work with their actual data. So instead of needing a developer to build custom connections every time you want AI to access your database or file system, MCP provides these standardized plug and play connectors. So that means that less technical folks or people without a programming background can now actually have AI work directly with your real business data, your personal files, your company's existing tools without needing any complex setup or deep coding knowledge. So that's the essence of what we're going to look at today. And I'm going to hand off to Owen just now for a live demonstration of how this works.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, for introducing the concept. So hopefully through this next demo, We can show you how MCP actually works, how it looks in the real world, and how you can actually get value from it or connect to it today. So first of all, you will see here, I've got my Claude interface open. You might not have interacted with Claude directly before, but this interface is going to look very similar to anyone that's used ChatGPT or Google Gemini or any of these other tools. You've got your interface, and it's a little chat here. You can see it's also said, "Hey there, Alan," because I've stolen someone else's account for today. Alan within Sedna. But either way, we have our interface here. So you might have seen on other AI tools, you have these additional buttons here for things like research and search and tools that you can apply. Where MCP comes in is exactly within this tool section. So you can see there's a few recommended by Claude here, things like connecting to Google products. And then we have a few of the tests that I've been running, but also our actual Sedna MCP server. Before I jump into exactly what that is, I want to kind of show how wide the MCP space is currently. So if I click on Add Connectors here, you can see there's lots of different tools out there that use MCP and all these model connecting protocols. Things like Google Calendar, HubSpot, Intercom, Notion, all these different tools you might be using within your organization. They've already set up these MCP servers, so you can bring all this data into your Claude or Copilot or whatever AI interface you might be using. There's also some additional ones, and you can connect and create ones yourself as well. Things like PDF filling, Spotify. There are hundreds or thousands of MCP connectors and lots more coming up every day. And yeah, there's a lot that you can do with MCP out there. But looking at our specific Sedna use case, what MCP exposes is a list of tools. So the kind of interaction between the AI model and the MCP server is the AI model requests to the server and says, "What tools do you have available for me?" And our MCP server then returns a list of tools that the language model can choose and select and work with. So you can see the list of tools available here. And all of these are representative of things that exist within the Sedna platform and within Stream. So we have things like category tags, we have things like teams, users, user information, job references, contacts, messages. All of these bits of an email platform are now available as different tools. And sat behind each of these tools is a description of what that tool is. So we have a description that describes what get message actually means. What does that mean in the context of email? And that then takes the AI model down the route of whenever I ask a question and put a question into this box, it can look at all of the tools that are available to it, look at the descriptions, and it makes the decision itself of which tool it should use based on the context available to it. So it's really this kind of next level thinking of AI where we can allow the AI model to make its own choices and get the most value out of that data. So rather than just talking about it, let's run an actual example. So here we have a Sedna inbox. This is one of our demo environments, but I can choose a random message from here. Let's say it's this Royal Emperor. So this MV Royal Emperor, we have one of the messages, but let's say I want a general overview of what's happening with this vessel. So I can take that name, and it's nothing more than the name of the vessel. I can jump into Claude and I can say, tell me about the vessel, paste that name in, from Sedna. And what's going to happen in real time is that bit of text is going to be sent to Claude. Claude is then going to make the decision of which of those tools to use. You can see it's chosen get job references. And if I open up this is where Rob was talking about our API. What the MCP protocol and what Claude is doing is deciding which data it needs to send to our API. And Sedna is then returning a response of information. And it's, as you can see, it's very structured information. Claude then knows how to process that information and find what it needs to get out of it. And we then have, it's doing another search there, and then finally it's getting some messages associated with that job reference. So we've got a bunch of messages that have now come back. Again, Claude is reading all of this information and then extracting the actual value out of it based on what I asked originally. So we can see here, it's analyzed all those messages. It's found that there's actually 3 voyages associated with this vessel. Based on the content within those messages and within all of the tags, it's figured out that one of them is closed, one of them is current, and one of them is upcoming. It's given me some technical report and some general information on that vessel and what communication's gone to it. let's say I want to go a level deeper. I could then go and ask about this specific voyage. Tell me about that voyage. And then what we hope this will then go and do, again, this is AI, so it can go and make its own decisions, is we'll query Sedna based on that specific voyage itself, and it will return more details about what's happening. Things like the recent communications, the technical reports, all the recent system checks. Based on all the information that's within those messages, it will condense it into a super readable format from there. We could then go another step further if we want, because there's lots of tools built into Claude that we can then use along with our MCP server. Any tool that we have turned on here, the MCP server can decide which one of these to use. So one of these that I have is a visual report. So, and this will generate some code and create a web page for me based on the information. So if I go into here and type, create a visual report based on this data, it'll then go off and create a visual report for me. This is going to take a little bit of time. So while it goes and writes its own code and sets up a web page, I can also run through a bit more information as well. See Rob's taking off his mic there as well.
Yeah, just checking it, Owen. So
Mhm.
this it's not just Claude that can run this. There are other tools that, this works in a Copilot or,
Mhm.
an AI ChatGPT, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So all of the major AI labs have now accepted this protocol that was originally designed by Anthropic. So if you go and search about MCP with OpenAI, if you go search about it with Copilot, all of these different labs have accepted the protocol. So we can see that within, after I have a different connection we have set up. And this is using Microsoft's Copilot Studio, the exact same connection that I made in Claude, I've also made here. You can see that Sedna MCP endpoint, and those same list of tools are available. The same questions that I asked in Claude, I can ask here. This then makes the MCP and all of that Sedna data available within your Teams channels, within your Word documents, wherever you're using Microsoft Copilot. You can also use all of your Sedna data, which gets really interesting when you start thinking about all of the use cases of things that might be locked in documents that associate with shipping data as well.
Right. Yeah. And what about if folks on the call, if they have their own internal systems, they have APIs on those, they can configure MCP in front of those. It's not kind of you're locked to Sedna email.
Yeah, exactly. So I see there's lots of different tools that we can use, and alongside launching the actual protocol itself, Anthropic have designed a full technology suite behind this. So if you already have an API, they have a full Python package, JavaScript package, lots of different packages to allow you to transform your standard API into a model context protocol. Where a bit more of the work comes in is the security and bringing all of your authentication along with it. But you can get partway there with a lot of the tools that Anthropic have released, and they're all open source as well. A big part of MCP is the fact that the data is open source, and all of the protocols and code behind it are open source, so people can contribute to it. There's enterprise level checking on all of the different tools and configurations out there. You'll see companies like Microsoft and Amazon have released their own MCP servers as well. So it's a highly adopted process and quite quick to get on board, depending on what you're trying to get out of it.
Excellent.
And you can see here that visual port's now being created. So this has actually created a little JavaScript app for me based on all of the data that we pulled out of our Sedna system here. So things like charts, graphs, they're all fully interactive. It's given me a nice little overview that I can share. Why I quite like Anthropic as well is it's now generated this little app, but what I can do is publish this app. I can get an actual link for it. And I can copy that link. Let's say I go to a web page, go to that, and I can now share this with anybody. And that's now a visual dashboard report that I can share with people. I can put this in the chat, or I can ask the people from Maritime Tech to share this later on as well. So you can click around this yourself. Or if you wanted to take this within your own environment and go and customize it and interact with this within your own Claude environment, you can feel free to do that as well. It'll take you, and you can chat there too. So there's a lot more that comes with bringing your data into an AI model. We don't want you to think about this as just bringing your Sedna data into a chat. It's figuring out new interesting ways of interacting with your data as well.
And Owen, this was, a couple of lines of chat with the machine there. Presumably this could be trained to be much more specific and relevant for the format, the data that it pulls out. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. There's lots of ways we could interact with this. This was me typing lines of text into a chat interface and asking for specifically whatever I want. What we could do is set up things like saved prompts. So it could be that every day at a certain time, it runs a daily analysis and looks over your entire inbox and gives you a visual report of that, or gives you a text-based report. There's lots of other ways that we can interact with the model. One of them that gets really interesting is voice communication. So I'm not going to test it right now because I'm speaking live and there might be microphone issues. But I could chat to Claude and ask it in natural language, hey, can you tell me what's going on with this vessel? And I can turn it on for allow it to speak back to me too. So it could tell me, yeah, this is what's going on with the vessel, and kind of in that Google Home, Siri-esque way of voice communication, but now interacting both with a language model and with your Sedna data. All of that capability instantly becomes available to you as well.
Cool. And presumably this can connect to other technologies as well. It's not just you pick one thing and it can only look that up. The benefit here is that this can chain together different connectors as well.
Yeah, so as you see, we've had our different MCP tools here. I've only got one turned on right now, but if I had things like my Google Calendar or my Drive on, and I asked it a question such as, go check within my Google Drive, get this Excel file, and check that data against what's in Sedna. It will link together all of these tools. As it did multiple tool calls here, you saw it got job references and it got messages. It could be talking to multiple systems here as well. And it would pull together all of that information and then display it in one kind of coherent message as it has here too. The other side of this, which we currently haven't gone live with yet within our MCP system, is sending data the other way. So right now, you can see we're pulling lots of data, we're getting job references, we're getting messages. The other half of this is actually doing actions within Sedna. Because Sedna is a API-first platform, every action that's available within Sedna is available over the API. So that's things like creating messages, updating your contact lists, creating tags, applying tags, all of these things that are actions within the platform, we can do over the API, which also means we can do over our MCP server. So in the next version of this, we're looking at these kind of more interactive workflows where it could be, I'm asking my AI model to go get some information from an Excel file that lives within Google and to email all of the people within that Excel file with an overview of this vessel. And our hope is that the MCP server will go and grab all the information from Sedna for that vessel. We'll go and grab the list of contacts or email addresses from an Excel sheet somewhere. We'll pull all that information together and we'll draft and send an email out of Sedna as well. You can kind of see that these interactions get quite interesting. We're doing a slow release of this because things can get quite dangerous on that side as well. But we're working with some of our enterprise customers as well to see where this can bring value to them, which tools are helpful, which tools aren't. And it's really a refining process right now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, I hope that demo has been helpful for everyone as well. A nice overview. There's been a lot of people talking about MCP. It's quite hard to visualize and understand. So yeah, I hope that's kind of put it into a real context for you all. And I think we're going to jump into questions next. If that's right, Carl.
I've got some resources as well. Oh, and if you allow me to share the screen again, I'll put some of those up so everyone can have a look. Great. Cool. Yeah, so we've got some links for everyone as well. So look, if you're a Sedna customer and you want to learn more about this, you can get in touch with us. Just send an email to operations@sedna.com. But if not, if you want to have a chat with us about this and guide yourselves through it, feel free to reach out to the sales team. But we have some links here about Model Context Protocol, Anthropic's official language on that, including the connectors and partners at those links, and a pretty good blog post from the Hugging Face team on why this is important and why it's so popular at the minute. So we'll share those in the chat, make sure they're available to all attendees. But definitely happy to take some questions and answers now.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, if you want to stop, well, we can leave that. The question in my mind. So I was talking before we started, Owen, about symbolic and machine learning AI. I don't know how many people use these terms, but to understand how it works. So you've got the LLM, which is machine learning, linking to Sedna, which is symbolic AI. And Sedna spent 10 years building this tool. It's very sophisticated to be able to extract the right information from email, but it has to be very carefully trained to all the messages, and it's within I guess the scope has to be quite limited. You can't just understand every email, so you've trained it for chartering messages. I don't know how far that would go into technical messages, but is that correct, the way it works?
So the actual work with understanding the context of the messages here, we're passing off that part of the equation to Claude itself and to OpenAI or whoever you're connecting your MCP server to. So it's down to that model to understand the context of it. All we're doing is passing the actual content of the email and content of those messages. So because we know that large language models are generally getting better every year, we start to go down the route of looking if we could train a language model or if we could make the language model more specific on our end. But there's so many billions of dollars worth of money being put into these models that we found that it's better to hand off that harder work to the models and for us to instead curate the data that's passed to the models instead. So we're not doing any specific training on our side. So we're not limited to these improvements and getting kind of funneled down into what the model's going to understand. But what we can do is fine tune and make specific all of that data that we send to the model and position that data in the right way that the model will understand it. So that when it receives the data, it knows to look in the right place for the information, and we can guide it on what that company is, who's asked for the information, who the user is that's asked for the information, so that by the time it gets to the language model, it starts to really understand what needs to happen with the information and present it in the right way.
So Sedna is extracting the data from the email in a structured way. The LLM is working with that.
Yes.
Yes. Do you want to stop screen sharing so people can see our faces really big? Yeah, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's important in knowing. So we've got some very interesting questions coming up. So I guess the first one from Jeremy Ang from OSM Tome Ship Management in Singapore was asking how to put that example about the rocks into Claude, which I've done in the, you can see that in the answered section. So Claude could actually answer that question. But the bigger point here is that the LLMs by themselves are not necessarily good with facts. I think that's you need other systems to.
Yeah, I mean, supplying what we're doing with MCP as well, supplying it with more of that truth as well. If you leave the language model to just come up with its own stuff, it will come up with its own stuff. But if we supply it and say, these are the facts, put them in the right shape, that's where it gets more interesting, which is, yeah, if you ask a random question out of nowhere, it'll come up with a random answer out of nowhere as well. Yeah.
Oh, very good. So Elisa Sannes from GAC Norway, AI coordinator and marketing. So she wants to know how you make integration with Claude GDPR compliant. Well, I suppose that's a completely separate world. I mean, presumably you can by making sure it only sees things it's allowed to see or it's got permission to see, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a full authentication layer built into the MCP server. So all of the OAuth security and all of these compliance levels that we have with logging into Sedna happen over the API and happen over MCP as well. So the same as if you are logging into Sedna and have all that information, all those security pipelines are there. Where the Claude part of it comes in, there's different license levels within Claude or Copilot that mean your data won't be trained on. Because it's you owning that model and you owning that license, it's down to our customers to select which model they're using and which tier of model they're using. That's external to us. But it's kind of making the right decision there, and we can help guide our customers on that as well. For example, there is an enterprise license of Claude and of OpenAI and of Copilot that mean your data is completely secure, compliant, SOC 2, GDPR, and all of that. So it's around you selecting the right license on the model itself will make it GDPR compliant.
Wow, very good. So, sorry, you're going to say something, James? No, okay. So
No,
it's
no,
Kartik from Marine Insight, co-founder in India. He's saying, how does this work with Outlook inboxes? Well, I guess you have to have a license with Sedna that does the extracting the data from the email first. Is that?
Well, so this principle is, can be connected to anything effectively. So like, we've shown you an example of what a, well-structured API connected via model context protocol, can do, particularly in an email system that has, access to the whole email repository. But you can absolutely go and plug this into, an Outlook setup, an Exchange setup today. I'm sure Microsoft have their own versions of, the MCP server that works through their Graph API to connect with Outlook inboxes. So this technology is not just, gated to folks who use a Sedna email system. It's a fully open protocol that anyone can use and any application developer can put in front of their technology. So it's really, something that can be used anywhere.
But you have to have Sedna, though. I mean, people can't just connect Claude to Microsoft 365 and expect these kind of results because
they could, yeah, the potential
right.
to do it, but it all depends on the setup, of your kind of 365 environment, your Exchange environment. There are APIs available to access, your email data in 365. Whether or not, you're going to be restricted by, the size of the mailbox or some of those API limitations, that's another story. But yeah, the opportunity and the possibility is there.
Oh, right. Well, you wouldn't be any role for Sedna then if that was possible.
We like to think that we've solved the key problem, which is the kind of email repository aspect, which is, where I think most of the traditional kind of systems today struggle. So, I think that's what we unlock is your whole, business email repository through that API, as opposed to just a small slice of it.
Yeah. Because an LLM can only see a small few messages at once, can't it? It can't see 10,000 messages.
Yeah, so through these kind of lookups, there's a very contextual kind of, version of the data that it's going to look at. But, if you combine that, and this is what we see in some of our, customers, if you combine that with your own, data warehousing, with your own kind of business data sources and, other kind of lookup capabilities, you can get some pretty in-depth kind of analysis going through this protocol.
Yeah, and the other side of that kind of Sedna's MCP pulls in as well is all of the tag information and the data attributes that sit behind that. So when a Sedna customer has a VMS, for example, and all of that voyage management data comes into Sedna and creates tags, all of that tag information and context pulls into the MCP server and into the language model. So it puts that message and that email in the context of the tag, and all of the voyage management system information or whatever information comes with that message. It's not just in the email body itself, but it's within all of that tag. That's what kind of brings that maritime specific, vessel specific, voyage specific information into.
Yeah, so it's much easier for the LLM to work with if it says, here's information about this specific vessel that already knows, doesn't have to guess what.
Yeah, don't hallucinate this. Here's the information for you. Yes.
Yeah, very good. So back to Norway, Lisa Sanders from GAC Norway. Does the LLM train on the data it receives? I guess it doesn't. You're not training the LLM.
Yeah, we're not training anything here. We are just applying the information to the LLM. Again, it comes back to selecting the right model or the correct model provider, and choosing the correct license within Claude or OpenAI that will train or won't train on your data, depending on your requirements. For business use cases, I'd say just pay for the higher license, and you don't run that risk.
Oh, very good. So Professor Ninetta Palemi from Cybersecurity Professor at University of Piraeus wants to ask about the AI Act, which is the EU rule. I don't actually know anything about it at all, but maybe you do. Is it,
yeah, again, because we're not owning the model here and not owning the process, it's down to kind of Claude and OpenAI to comply by that AI Act and the AI Acts that are out there in terms of AI safety. We're supplying it with information, but at the end of the day, we're not doing the model hosting or development work. Where we're supplying the context of the Sedna inbox to the model. So our piece specifically wouldn't fall under the AI Act of compliance unless we were to train our own model, which we're not doing.
No, very good. So now we're going to Japan. Kaito Suzuki. I'm an AI developer. Is Sedna's MCP server publicly available? I guess it isn't because Well,
Yeah,
we should
you'd
get the
need
dummy
a
data.
yeah, you need a Sedna tenant. You'd need licenses and seats within there. So if you are a Sedna client, then yes, it's available to you today. You can turn it on, but if not, fortunately, you wouldn't be able to connect to it. I have investigated connecting it to a demo environment so people can interact with it, but that's not live yet.
Oh, very good. So now we're going to India. Yugesh Venkatasan, he's a technical analyst with Scorpio Marine. Will this only work on emails with a certain fixed format or unorganized emails as well? So I don't know if you want to, because you're telling me earlier you spent 10 years building this software to train and
Mhm.
understand emails, probably mainly related to chartering.
Mhm.
So I guess
Yeah,
this is a scope, isn't it? It's not just emails, but anything, because there's a lot of
yeah,
training
I can
involved.
share my screen again and kind of give a bit more flavor to this one. So what you see here, it's definitely unorganized data. So language models are really good at sorting unorganized data. What we have here, I just make this a bit smaller. This is the way that we structure email data. So you have our get messages here. And what the Sedna API does and the whole Sedna process is it takes unorganized email data and puts it in a specific shape. So we have things like the message ID, the type of email that it is, the attributes behind it. So that's the subject line, the who it's from, who it's to, a small snippet of that information, the actual body text of the information. You can see like things like this body text is unorganized data, but we hand it to the model in an organized way. Things like if they have attachments, when they're received at, if it's signed, unsigned, what tags and teams have access to this data. All of that comes in a very structured format, but parts of it are unstructured. So it's that mix of information. But again, we hand this data to the language model in a way that we know it will understand best. So it's kind of somewhere in the middle.
I mean, if it was emails about spare parts, for example, or
Mhm,
sorting out some shipboard safety compliance, which is not your normal domain, and
mhm.
I'm guessing you probably haven't programmed your system to develop tags for those kind of messages, so it wouldn't be able to cover those. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing here is, as Owen kind of touched on, we spent a long time, developing our own kind of recognition and the ability to kind of categorize and structure things like you mentioned, they're chartering operational messages. The really interesting thing is these models today actually can very accurately and confidently detect other formats, so the need to really do extensive kind of pre-training on things to recognize and extract key data is becoming less and less. And that's really the interesting pivot, of people who've worked on, this structure of unstructured data for a long time. All of that work you've done, actually, overnight, these models come and they release a new version and it's 10 times better than the last one. So we no longer have to spend a long time, doing very specific training. We already have, examples of 90+% accuracy from the default model set. So the last kind of 10% becomes that extra refinement, the prompting, the way in which you kind of instruct the LLMs to kind of look at the data and analyze it and point out what's important. So that's really the space we're kind of in at the minute.
This is said.
The, sorry, yeah, I was just going to add on that. Rob kind of touched on the point there of that continuous improvement as well. And we've seen this within Claude even yesterday. Anthropic released a new model, which is their Claude Sonnet 4.1 Opus, because AI model labs can't come up with good names for things. So yeah, Claude Sonnet 4.1 Opus is their brand new model. It's now the best in the world, so they say. But what this means is that everyone that was connected onto Sedna's MCP now has 10 times, according to Anthropic's, better communication. They have a 10 times better model available to them. So without doing anything at all, our MCP service and Sedna's MCP service is 10 times better because we're relying on the AI labs and their billions of dollars of investment to improve these models. So it's kind of a different paradigm of interacting with the technology providers, really.
Yeah, but this is the semantic side, the sort of talking side. It's not the
Yep,
understanding the shipping domain knowledge side, which is
exactly. Yeah.
very good. So I think Truls Müller is with Rena in Denmark. You mentioned major labs have accepted the MCP protocol. Are there any competing alternatives Or do you foresee the industry will converge to this protocol? I'm guessing you can write your own server if you want on an API, but this makes it easier, I suppose. That's a...
Yeah, I mean, there are a few other protocols. So there's a specific shape of data that we have to send to all of the different language models that fits the protocol. And there is another one. There's one called A2A, which is agent to agent. And that one was developed and designed by Google, and it was released like 5 days after MCP was released by Anthropic. So the weird time. Since then, A2A has kind of disappeared off of the map, and Google now actually push code and help maintain MCP instead. So there is a little bit of competition out there. But not only are all of these major AI labs actually allowing MCP to connect to their language models, they're also helping maintain the code of MCP as well. So that's a really positive signal that this is going to stick around for a long time. There has been mass adoption, but there is always that risk of, a new protocol comes out. But there's always that risk in technology. You've got things like Java and JavaScript and Python and all your different programming languages and different frameworks that sit behind them. These things are subject to change all the time. It's just kind of the risk we run as software developers, that there could be competition. But we are quite a fast-moving company at Sedna, so we look to stay on top of that if it does change. But following the news today and how all of the AI labs are interacting with this, I believe we're in a safe position with MCP.
Yeah, I mean, it's making it easier than working with APIs.
It's exposing an API in a slightly different way, and it's really easy to work with. As I said, it's well contributed to by the entire AI ecosystem. So
and I think the challenge really has been, people have dabbled with AI tools, Claude, ChatGPT, Copilot, but beyond going and working with the corpus of data that's available to them, it proves little kind of value in your actual practical existence. So now actually being able to go and say, well, connect to my calendar, connect to my email, connect to my X, Y, and Z, now unlocks a world where you can start to interact from a single kind of conversational plane with these services that you might use every day. And it's actually a bit uncomfortable for some folks to think, hey, this machine's going and accessing my to-do list. And that's I think the big kind of the mental shift we'll see. But even just playing around with something like this in your free version of Claude and plugging something in is actually a great way to kind of build some confidence and see the practicality of this. And I think that's what it's going to unlock, some pretty big productivity gains. MCP is just the protocol that kind of brought that reality to life in a practical and fast way first. But of course, as Owen mentions, this is changing by the day, and it's on our shoulders to stay on top of that as well.
Oh, very good. So we're going back to India now from Yugesh from Scorpio. So I've got to pay for Claude and I have to pay for Sedna. I think that's correct, is it, to use this as you demonstrated it?
To use this particular interaction Owen demonstrated, you would need Claude, and I don't know, Owen, if the free Claude lets you do the MCP.
No, so free Claude doesn't, because it doesn't have access to the 4 models, Claude 4. You'd need at least the pro license of Claude to do this. Other model providers might be different. Things like if you have a certain Microsoft license, you might already have Copilot, which means you can connect MCP to your Copilot. So there are, it depends on what licenses you already own, but I think in most cases, you'd have to pay for the higher tier of language model.
Yeah, and of course, if you want to plug that into the API first email client like Sedna, obviously you'd have to have a license there. But of course, the principle is you can plug that into anything with an API or an MCP server in front of it.
Well, very good. So Kenichi Endo, not sure where he is, sounds like in Japan. So in the demo, you had an operation to connect to the Sedna MCP server. What's the difference between MCP and an MCP server? I suppose there's no difference, is there?
So the MCP server is kind of the server that we develop and host that points the language model to the right tool. So that's the MCP server that exists within our kind of Amazon environment. So that exists there. The MCP connection, which I assume what you've called MCP here, that's where within your language model, you give your Sedna connection key, essentially. You do your Sedna login on the MCP. that talks to the MCP server, which in hand talks to Sedna. So there's kind of those different bits there. So you've got your connection, your server, and then Sedna itself. We did actually a few weeks ago do a webinar with Amazon Web Services themselves, where we went a bit deep into the technical side of it. So if there are architects out there looking at this, there's a webinar with us and Amazon themselves on the technical construction of all of it.
Yeah, I added a link to the chat as well. For the Model Context Protocol overview link is a good resource to kind of, you know, distill the differences between the language and the actual setup here. So feel free to have a look at that.
Okay, yeah, I've just seen Kenichi is with Orient Marine in Japan. So now I think we're going to Greece. Konstantinos Natokos, I think he's with Hellenic Navy. So is Sedna passing all the relevant emails about your query to the LLM, or does it decide that some are irrelevant? Oh, sorry. So he's with Starbulk, Hellenic Navy. And how does it choose which emails to pass on? Well, this is your 10 years of development of working out which of emails are important and getting the right data from them and which aren't personal messages.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to pull up the interface here again. So the way that it selects the right messages for all of this is that you can see here, I asked about the specific vessel MV Royal Emperor. You can see the API call that it did here is it sent a request to Sedna with that specific name, the MV Royal Emperor. Using just Sedna's standalone APIs, it went and searched for all of this. Unfortunately, it didn't find anything specifically there. So then it looked for Royal Emperor and it did find a tag. The tag itself was actually Royal Emperor, not MV. So it found the tag Royal Emperor, which is an interesting interaction as well, because it tried to search for something, didn't find it, and actually tried a different method and did find the information. So yeah, based on me asking that specific question, it went off and found the tag relating to it. It then did a second API call where using this tag ID, or using another tag ID, I think this is the 885, it then went and got the latest 10 messages that have that tag applied. And here we see that email data actually come back. So it's based on my question, MV Royal Emperor, it's gone and found the correct tag and it's gone and pulled the latest emails and then showing me those emails in that view again as well. Again, when I've asked about a specific voyage, it's looked for that, or earlier it figured out that that was the voyage tag. So it's looking for messages with that tag again, and then finding the right information. So yeah, based on my question, it's doing these calls, pulling the right information. So it's all language based, but working in a very structured way with our APIs.
And furthermore, you could say, you know, exclude noon reports or, you know, not so bothered about the weather kind of things. And it can use that context to then say, well, any email that, you know, looks like a noon report or is tagged with noon report, you know, I'm not going to consider in this question and answer. So, you know, that's the level of kind of converting conversational context into actual tags, nuts and bolts context of a machine that it can do.
Yeah, Sedna is doing the tagging, not the LLM.
Correct.
That's quite an important point.
Yeah,
because that's a bit where you need Sedna to. I think that's quite important in understanding how this works and the scope of it. And
we provide that structure in the inbox. You know, and obviously it's, you know, easy for humans to use search and you know and tags to find things historically, but you know machines are really good at then going and taking that larger corpus of, you know, this structured data, quickly kind of filtering, sorting, including excluding the relevant parts, and then giving a much more kind of comprehensive answer, you know, back to the requester. So that's the kind of interaction where, you know, combined with a structured data source, this can actually be quite powerful.
so if somebody had an email about a confidential issue, for example, a salary or a health issue, so Sedna's tagging system would you've trained that to know, or to at least not know, no, it's not a discussion about a certain vessel's deliveries.
Yeah, there are boundaries between the data, right? So the data will exist in team spaces. You know, we'll point, you know, the MCP at the team spaces, for example. You know, we obviously take that kind of, you know, confidentiality, the data security aspect very seriously. So there is, you know, significant logical separation between your personal email data, you know, the things containing your, you know, your pay slips, your HR matters, versus the more open team relevant kind of operational data.
Yeah, because that's split within Sedna regardless. when the MCP server is talking to Sedna, it recognizes those splits, so the information wouldn't be pulled anywhere.
Yeah,
because a lot of people use the same inbox for personal stuff and employee stuff and business stuff, wouldn't they? Or maybe virtually everybody does. So, I mean,
well, that's kind of one of the journeys we take customers on, is kind of making that call on, what is private truly and what is kind of team, relevant email. So that luckily, the architecture of our system kind of helps to keep that separation quite nicely.
well, and what is the scope of your tagging? I mean, you showed quite an enormous amount there, but I mean, a lot you showed so quickly. But so when you see vessel names, you're picking out stuff about crew, stuff about arrival times, stuff about.
Yeah.
Is that something you've defined quite closely, or I guess perhaps you're extending it all the time? Are you?
Yeah, it's an evolving concept for us. So, we work across, the maritime space, and we obviously see, companies that look quite similar, but, what we find is every, business works in their own unique way as well. So it's not like we go in and prescribe, the gold standard way to work for, voyage ops. Every business has their own, quirks and requirements for that. So we kind of look at what we know works, look at the data structures that we have found to be most effective, and then kind of find the middle ground between how customers like to work, the data that's important to them. And we create bespoke kind of tagging structures for their voyages, for their claims, for the categorization of their emails, their chartering, maybe their post fixture, even all the way through to the technical, the ship management side of things. And that's what Owen showed today, actually, was actually a ship management system demo. But we verticalize those configurations, but we make them customizable enough so businesses can, take the best practices, but make it unique to them. And, as I mentioned at the start, your email data is really, your IP is your competitive advantage. So we make sure that it's possible for you to handle your email, organize it in a way that makes you the most effective and the most competitive in the industry. But we provide that level of structure behind it.
Yeah, and this tagging system is fascinating, but I guess that's Sedna's intellectual property. I don't know if you make it available to other software companies or something you, I guess, of you.
Yeah, that's the secret sauce right now. But look, it's kind of, it's a common paradigm having to organize maritime email. A voyage, for example, will only have certain types of messages in it throughout the life cycle. So it's not like it's anything novel, but we like to think that we've found a way to organize and structure the data in a way that's quite meaningful. And we're continuing to explore that wider in the maritime space with our customers as well. There's a lot of work to do here, especially with these systems getting much more intelligent. How can we now start to leverage those to do a bit more of that detection, organization, and take away the human effort there as well?
Yeah, we're coming to the end now, I think. I'll be for 2 minutes. Well, that's fantastic. I think that's very interesting, opening a lot of doors, and I think we can all see how this can go further. I don't know if you want to take a last word, anything you want to leave people with before we finish? Or...
No, I mean, resources are there in the chat. For us, this is super exciting. We're obviously, working on this with a few key customers. If there's any Sedna customers out there who want to inquire, feel free to. If there's anyone who's interested, wants to learn more, absolutely feel free to reach out to us as well if you're not sure where to start. But yeah, it's a very exciting time in maritime technology in general. And we're very, pleased to be able to go and share some of that knowledge and the examples with the wider community. So yeah, looking forward to what people go and do with it.
Yeah. Oh, and you've got one last question from Jeremy from OSM. If can you switch to a different AI?
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that in a few seconds?
If Claude is no longer available, we can. MCP is designed in a way that it can work with any language model. If it's Copilot, OpenAI, we're open to switching to any of them. Claude is my favorite, but the technology that we've built allows us to go across different tools regardless. Go try out Claude. It's good.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, it's a very exciting webinar and a whole new world. So I shall pass back to Farah for the closing words. Cheers.
Yep.
Thanks to our guest speakers, Owen Brennan and Robert Dickey from our sponsors, Sedna, and to our audience. For those of you who may have missed today, some of today's webinar, don't worry, we've got you covered. An email with contact details will be sent to you soon, plus a link of a recording of today on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, it's free. Do tune in next month for our next webinar with Coach Solutions, which you can book online at our website. And also, please feel free to leave your thoughts on today's event on our survey, which should be on your screens shortly. And we will see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.